What if the fall of the Empire wasn't the end of tyranny, but the beginning of something far more complicated? That's the uncomfortable truth Star Wars canon quietly tells us. When Emperor Palpatine dies at Endor, the galaxy doesn't exhale in relief and move on. It stumbles forward, wounded, divided, and unsure what freedom even looks like anymore. The destruction of the second Death Star ends an era, but it does not end the consequences of decades of authoritarian rule. Instead, it opens a new chapter, defined not by clear villains and heroes, but by uncertainty, political hesitation, and the long shadow of an empire that refuses to stay buried. Victory at Endor, and the illusion of a clean ending. The Battle of Endor feels like a perfect finale. The Emperor is dead, Darth Vader is redeemed, and the Rebel Alliance celebrates beneath the trees of a moon that suddenly represents hope. But that cinematic ending hides a reality that canon later makes unavoidable. Empires do not collapse neatly. The Galactic Empire wasn't just a single ruler, it was an entire system that controlled fleets, economies, prisons, and information across thousands of worlds. Killing the head did not dismantle the body. It only removed the central command, leaving countless Imperial officers, governors, and military assets scattered across the galaxy with no clear chain of authority. In practical terms, Endor didn't end the war. It fragmented it. Imperial forces splintered into regional commands, warlord territories, and isolated fleets that refused to surrender. Some systems celebrated liberation. Others were abandoned overnight, left to deal with shortages, lawlessness, and the sudden disappearance of the only government they had known for a generation. From rebels to rulers. In the aftermath of Endor, the Rebel Alliance faced a problem no blaster could solve. How do you turn a resistance movement into a government? The answer was the New Republic, a revived democratic state modeled after the old republic that existed before Palpatine's rise. The Senate was restored, member worlds were invited to join voluntarily, and the language of freedom replaced the language of fear. But governing is far harder than rebelling. The New Republic inherited a galaxy traumatized by surveillance, propaganda, and military occupation. Trust in centralized power was low, even among those who despise the Empire. To avoid repeating history, the New Republic made a defining choice. It drastically reduced its central military forces, believing that peace would be preserved through diplomacy rather than overwhelming firepower. The intention was noble, but the consequences would prove dangerous. The Battle of Jakku. The Galactic Civil War officially came to an end 1 year after Endor at the Battle of Jakku. This brutal confrontation marked the Empire's final large-scale military stand against the New Republic. Jakku was not just another battlefield. It was a deliberate last gamble by Imperial leadership, resulting in catastrophic losses on both sides and leaving the planet surrounded by wreckage that would linger for decades. The aftermath of Jakku led to a formal peace agreement known as the Galactic Concordance. This treaty forced the remaining Imperial government to surrender, disarm, and accept severe restrictions. On paper, the war was over. In reality, it had simply changed shape. Jakku became a symbol of what victory often leaves behind: ruins, scavengers, and unanswered questions about who pays the price for galactic-scale conflict. The Empire doesn't die. It disperses. One of the most realistic and unsettling elements of Star Wars canon is that the Empire does not simply vanish after its defeat. When Palpatine dies and the Central Command collapses, there is no single moment where every Imperial officer drops their rank plaque and goes home. Instead, the Empire fractures. Some officers surrender and attempt to reintegrate into civilian life, often portraying themselves as bureaucrats who were just doing their jobs. Others refuse to recognize the legitimacy of the New Republic at all, carving out personal fiefdoms where their authority goes unchallenged. Entire fleets disappear into hyperspace, taking loyal crews, stolen resources, and classified data with them. This dispersion matters because it allows Imperial ideology to survive without a central throne. Without Palpatine, there is no single voice, but there are many echoes. The belief that the galaxy needs rigid control. That order is more important than freedom, and that fear works faster than consent does not die with the Emperor. It simply adapts. In poorly monitored systems and remote regions, these ideas linger like radiation after an explosion. They reorganize quietly, learning from failure instead of being erased by it. Leia Organa and the warning no one wanted to hear. While the Senate debates peace treaties and reconstruction budgets, Leia Organa grows increasingly alarmed. Unlike many senators, Leia does not view the Empire as a defeated enemy, but as a dangerous system temporarily disarmed. She understands how easily complacency can become vulnerability, because she lived through the Empire's rise and watched the Republic fall from the inside. To her, the absence of open war does not mean safety. It means the enemy has gone quiet. Leia repeatedly warns that Imperial remnants are not gone, only hidden, and that the New Republic's decision to drastically reduce its military leaves the galaxy exposed. Politically, these warnings are deeply inconvenient. The galaxy is exhausted. Worlds want stability, trade, and the reassurance that the war is finally over. Another call to arms feels irresponsible, even paranoid. As a result, Leia's concerns are dismissed as alarmist, and she finds herself increasingly isolated within the very government she helped build. Eventually, Leia makes a choice that defines the post-Empire era. She steps outside official structures to act where politics cannot. Quietly, she supports a smaller, faster, more flexible force dedicated to watching the shadows the Senate refuses to acknowledge. That force will become the Resistance. Not because Leia rejects the Republic, but because she fears what happens when a democracy refuses to see a growing threat. Life on the edge. Away from the Senate chambers and capital worlds, the galaxy after the Empire feels less like a triumphant new age and more like a frontier. With Imperial authority gone and New Republic enforcement spread thin, many systems fall into gray zones of power. Crime syndicates expand. Local militias replace stormtroopers. Justice becomes inconsistent, dependent on who controls the nearest hyperspace lane. This environment defines the era seen in stories set after Endor. Former Imperial bases become hideouts. Old battlefields turn into salvage economies. Entire communities survive by stripping valuable materials from derelict star destroyers. The end of centralized tyranny brings freedom to some worlds, but for others it brings uncertainty, danger, and isolation. The rise of the First Order in the shadows. While the New Republic focuses on healing, something else is growing beyond its sight. In the unknown regions, surviving Imperials quietly regroup, guided by a shared belief that the Empire did not fail, it was betrayed. Over years, these elements consolidate resources, train new generations, and construct a military that learns from past mistakes. This movement eventually emerges as the First Order, a regime that openly embraces the authoritarian ideals of the Empire while discarding its weaknesses. Unlike the old Empire, the First Order does not rule openly at first. It operates through secrecy, indoctrination, and precision. By the time it reveals itself to the galaxy, it is already strong enough to challenge the New Republic directly. Fighting without a republic. The existence of the Resistance is one of the clearest signs that the post-Empire galaxy is deeply fractured. Though supported quietly by sympathetic senators, it is not the official military arm of the Republic. It exists because the Republic cannot politically justify full mobilization, even as evidence of the First Order's threat becomes undeniable. This creates a grim irony. The galaxy that once rallied behind a unified rebellion now relies on a smaller, underfunded force to do what the government is unwilling or unable to do openly. History, it seems, is repeating itself, not because people forgot the past, but because they feared becoming it again. The real legacy of the Empire. The galaxy after the Empire teaches a sobering lesson. Ending a dictatorship is not the same as dismantling the culture and systems that allowed it to rise. The New Republic tries to govern differently, to lead without fear, to trust in diplomacy over domination. But good intentions do not erase old habits, nor do they prevent new threats from exploiting hesitation. In canon, the post-Empire era is not a failure of heroism. It is a failure of certainty. Leaders are cautious because they remember how easily emergency powers turned into tyranny. Citizens are skeptical because they survived a regime that punished dissent. And enemies thrive because they understand that fear never truly disappears. It only waits for the right moment to return. So the real question isn't whether the Empire was defeated, but whether the galaxy ever learned to live without it. When power fragments and fear adapts, the fight doesn't end. It evolves. And that may be the galaxy's hardest lesson of all. If you want to be smarter every day, like and subscribe.